The Voodoo Gates of New Orleans. A deep dive into cemeteries, spirits, and the Queen of Voodoo. New Orleans is a city that never fully lets go of its dead. In the humid air of New Orleans, music floats through iron balconies, candles flicker in old windows, and above-ground tombs rise like miniature cities of stone. But beyond the parades, the jazz, and the powdered sugar of Café du Monde, there are gates, heavy, black, wrought iron gates, and according to local legend, some of them are more than just entrances. They are guardians. They are thresholds. They are the Voodoo Gates. The cities of the dead. To understand the legend, you have to understand New Orleans itself. Unlike most American cities, New Orleans buries its dead above ground. The reason is practical. Much of the city sits below sea level, surrounded by water and marshland. When graves were dug in the early days, coffins would sometimes rise back to the surface after heavy rain. So, the city built upward. The cemeteries became cities of the dead, filled with family vaults and elaborate stone crypts. And among the most famous is St. Louis Cemetery No. 1, established in 1789. Narrow pathways, crumbling plaster, names fading into limestone, and iron gates guarding the entrances. At first glance, they look like typical 19th century cemetery gates, ornate, European in style. But look closer. You'll see crosses intertwined with circles, symbols that resemble stars, shapes that echo ancient patterns. Some believe these aren't just decoration, they are vivs, sacred symbols used in Louisiana Voodoo to call upon spirits known as LWA. What is Louisiana Voodoo? Before we go further, let's clear something up. Louisiana Voodoo is not the Hollywood version filled with dolls and curses. It's a complex spiritual tradition born from West African religions brought by enslaved people, blended with Catholicism, indigenous practices, and Caribbean influences. It took root in New Orleans in the 1700s and 1800s. In Voodoo belief, cemeteries are not places of horror. They are places of power, spiritual crossroads, thresholds between worlds. The dead are not feared, they are ancestors, guides, protectors, and gates matter, because gates represent the boundary between realms. The guardian of the gates, Papa Legba. In Voodoo tradition, no ritual begins without first calling upon the spirit who opens the way. Papa Legba. He is the gatekeeper of the spirit world, the one who controls the crossroads between the living and the dead. Without him, no communication can happen. Symbolically, every cemetery gate in New Orleans becomes a physical reminder of that spiritual gateway. When you stand before those iron bars, you are standing at a threshold. Some practitioners leave offerings at cemetery entrances, coins, rum, cigars, asking permission before entering. Not out of fear, out of respect. Marie Laveau and the power of the tomb. No discussion of Voodoo in New Orleans is complete without Marie Laveau. Born in 1801, she became known as the Voodoo Queen of New Orleans. She was a hairdresser by trade, but spiritually she was something else entirely. Marie Laveau blended Catholic prayer with African ritual. She held ceremonies on the shores of Lake Pontchartrain. She counseled the wealthy and the poor alike, and she is buried in St. Louis Cemetery No. 1. For decades, visitors would approach her tomb, draw 3 X's on the stone, knock 3 times, and make a wish. They believed the queen could still hear them. But over time, the markings damaged the tomb. In 2015, the Archdiocese restored it and banned unauthorized markings. Now access to the cemetery is restricted to guided tours. Still, people leave offerings, flowers, beads, small tokens pressed quietly against the gate, as if the iron itself carries the message. The cold spots and the shadows. Locals tell stories. Stories of gates that feel ice cold in Louisiana heat. Stories of shadows moving behind locked entrances long after the cemetery closes. Tour guides speak of cameras malfunctioning near certain tombs, of sudden gusts of wind in still air. Skeptics argue it's imagination, suggestion amplified by atmosphere. But in a city like New Orleans, belief is powerful, and the cemeteries sit in silence, holding centuries of memory. Symbolism in iron. In the 1800s, wrought iron craftsmanship flourished in New Orleans. The French and Spanish colonial influence is everywhere, especially in the ornate balcony railings of the French Quarter. The same artisans often created cemetery gates. Curves and spirals in iron weren't just aesthetic. Circles symbolize eternity. Crosses reflect Catholic influence. Some patterns resemble protective seals. Whether intentionally voodoo or simply European symbolism layered over African spirituality, the result is a fusion unique to this city. The gates became more than architecture, they became symbols of spiritual passage. Offerings at the threshold. One of the most persistent legends surrounding the voodoo gates is this. If you approach at midnight and make a request, you must leave something in return. Because in voodoo tradition, spirits are not servants, they are forces. You give, and you receive. Coins left at the gate, a splash of rum on the ground, 3 knocks, 3 whispers. Whether ritual or folklore, the act itself reinforces the belief that the gate is listening. The psychology of the gate. There's something universally unsettling about gates. They are neither fully open nor fully closed. They imply something beyond. In New Orleans, that feeling is amplified by history, yellow fever epidemics, Civil War burials, centuries of layered cultures. When you stand at a cemetery gate there, you're not just facing death, you're facing legacy, memory, spiritual continuity. Are the voodoo gates real? Physically? Yes. Spiritually? That depends on what you believe. There's no official designation of voodoo gates, no plaque marking them as supernatural portals. But folklore doesn't require official documentation. It requires atmosphere, history, storytelling. Final thoughts. In most cities, cemeteries are quiet places we avoid. In New Orleans, they are part of the city's heartbeat. The voodoo gates, whether literal iron or symbolic thresholds, remind us that in this city, the veil between worlds feels thinner. Not broken, just thinner. So if you ever find yourself standing before one of those black iron gates in the fading Louisiana light, pause, listen, and ask yourself, is it keeping something out or keeping something in?